Welcome back to Under the Plate, and today, following our last episode, which kind of focused on the beginning of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 and potentially seeing an Ever Crisis-like flashback, it's time to talk about none other than Sephiroth.
And speaking of Ever Crisis, whew, we've been eating in terms of Sephiroth content, and episode 2, has been kind of being released over these coming months and the prior months, and really we've been diving deep into how Sephiroth got the Masamune and such, but there's really just so much more there. I don't necessarily think we'll see a direct here's a recreated scene in a flashback, but there's so much here that just really enriches Final Fantasy VII's lore. And one of the big things in my mind across especially the recent Ever Crisis chapter releases has been you remember at TGS when they revealed part 2, it was what is Sephiroth's end game, and
Yep.
we pretty much, through playing Rebirth, it's definitely this world stuff, and it's still all connected to the live stream and everything. However, Ever Crisis has been really going into who is Sephiroth, and I think that's really what part 3 will end up delivering a bit on, even if it's not something super direct. But there's just so much there that it can easily be adapted and thrown in. And really, last episode having this type of flashback or big connection to Ever Crisis, I've been a bit behind on my research game, Noah, because I just quite literally found out this day of recording that Glenn wasn't even made. He wasn't made at all for Ever Crisis or First Soldier. He was always intended to be a character in Rebirth to expand and enrich it.
Yep.
So I'm convinced. I'm just completely convinced, like you were talking about. There has to be something deeper here. And Sephiroth's the big name on Ever Crisis right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's him, with First Soldier especially, obviously. And yeah, I mean, I hope everyone enjoyed that last episode. I highly encourage you, please go check out episode 33 if you haven't, to really get full context behind what we're talking about here. But in general, it's kind of funny when we talk about Ever Crisis and what it's done for Sephiroth's character, because it's funny because we actually made an episode on this really early on in Under the Plate, and that was in November of last year. And I think we made it just before part 2 of The First Soldier came out. But it's really funny looking back on it now because it's whoa, there's a lot going on here.
It's just becoming so clear that they've really wanted to move this direction for a long time. And I feel in terms of when you think of a series getting hugely expanded, we started getting the compilation 10 years after FF7. We saw a bunch of stuff for the Turks through before Crisis. Then there was Crisis Core, which had a lot of focus on Zack. And of course we saw some stuff with Sephiroth. We were a little more, personal with, his fall from grace. We saw Angeal and Genesis. But we've never really had anything directly about Sephiroth. And like you said, really early on into Under the Plate, we knew from that first set of chapters in Ever Crisis that they were really going to do something special with this. And that was when it was still mostly Glenn, being thrown on the top billing. And he's been kind of pushed back in favor of Sephiroth, which I really think is the move, because Glenn's already being incorporated into Rebirth, which, as we said, was kind of his conception as a character. But that means that storyline in Rebirth, he's messing with Rufus. He ends up changing his form into Sephiroth just to be a normal robed former soldier once everything's said and done. So there's definitely something deeper going on here. And before we really could dive into Glenn more, it's his connection to Sephiroth that I feel is the most important thing that Rebirth established. And we see a bit of that in Ever Crisis. We really see that he was kind of almost like a mentor-esque figure, similar to like Angeal to Zack, where he kind of is pushing him towards doing other things. He has a much brighter personality, and it does all kind of go haywire, and he's just not really been a core part of the plot, except for some possible hallucinations, illusions. We're not quite sure yet, but really, it's what Sephiroth's going through that is honestly the real meat of these 2 episodes of First Soldier so far. And we've been seeing parallels, we've been seeing build up, and I think it's just really about time for us to tear into it, because we sniffed something was afoot and was really cooking months. God, that was like what, almost a year ago now? Like, we knew something was cooking, and now it's evident that it's, God, it's gonna be a 5-star gourmet meal.
No, for sure. And again, like with your words on Glenn being designed for rebirth and why that's significant for us, it's a matter of the fact that Sephiroth and Glenn's relationship in Rebirth is something that was expanded upon in the mobile game. And we now have this big story that we're, slowly getting over the time of the next couple of years with the first soldier that's really showing us stuff we wouldn't get to see otherwise. So I think really just in terms of what we're talking about here and the importance of these events in part 3, Payne, do you kind of want to go through some of the biggest parts of what we've seen in the story so far to just kind of give people an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes with Sephiroth's past and potentially how we might see that in this final title?
So, it was kind of touched upon in episode 1 that, Sephiroth's different, he's special, and Shinra's really trying to push for him to be seen as like an icon, like this great hero. And tragedy does strike that kind of brings a rift between him and Glenn momentarily. They do end up making up and everything, however, it's just their actions and Sephiroth's just complete protection by Shinra means that they end up getting reprimanded and ultimately end up defecting. And so that just leaves Sephiroth alone again. And we've been introduced to Angeal now. We see this young Angeal, which is completely different from the kind of gruffer, slightly more sarcastic Angeal we see in Crisis Core. And you see him really trying to connect with Sephiroth and build him up, but that keeps being pushed back because Sephiroth has his eyes on a prize, a new sword. So we get a lot of lore stuff for Wutai, and there's some lines thrown around where, oh, well, they're not really supposed to be here. Things are already kind of tension high with Wutai, so I think this is really going to be the stuff that ends up leading to that Wutai war that solidifies Sephiroth as a hero. But here in this really strange village around Robio, like, gosh, there's weird things going on where Bachman, like, this character's introduced as he's just, like, recording all this stuff. But it's clear from the get that, this is all for the PR department. Let's record Sephiroth killing monsters. So that's just playing on from episode 1 of, we gotta make Sephiroth look good. He's this big corner piece of Shinra's grand plan of the soldier program. So all this is being recorded, and they're trying to find missing soldiers. There's 4 that got lost on this expedition while they were trying to research and investigate this area. And then it just comes down to there's a bunch of like illusions after they find this, like, the only surviving soldier of that group, Alyssa. And the first thing that happens is Sephiroth's like, oh my gosh, pulls out, well, he can't pull out his locket, but he remembers the picture of his mother in it, and like the resemblance is undeniable, and this really makes Sephiroth kind of like attach and listen to her. But then throughout the rest of these chapters that we have available, they're going through, they meet the swordsmith Masamune, who actually massacred this city that the only survivors were saved by Dachau, which we've already seen those crunchy beans that are clearly named after him in things like intergrade, or intermission rather. But so this just ends up with Angeal being like, hey guys, like we're all hallucinating things, we're all dreaming weird things, we're seeing apparitions, which might I add almost remind me of some things in like the City of the Ancients. Like honestly, this area is very unique, and Alyssa starts lore dumping us from things that these spirits are telling her. And there was like a monster that had attacked and just razed the village. Well, rather, the ancients had settled in Wutai about 2,000 years ago and had cultivated this land. And then a great monster, which they say the name isn't remembered, but I think they're really pushing towards some Genova-esque things here. I don't know if it'll directly be Genova, but there's definitely something strange going on in this chapter. And really just all these trials and everything that's going on with Sephiroth trying to acquire the sword from Masamune, it's really giving us a deeper look into what he really wants. He doesn't want all this PR Shinra hero nonsense. It just seems he just wanted to ever know his mother. And he keeps getting these visions of things that have never happened, but it almost seems like it could be possibly Genova's first link to Sephiroth and really trying to get him to do these things. And we also see Angeal pushing back these visions and denying them. But Sephiroth just keeps pressing forward, and it just seems like a bunch of things that have been beaten into his head are just kind of getting reaffirmed. Like, no, you can't give in to your emotions. You have to keep pushing and make instant decisions. And it's a lot, because in this time period, Sephiroth's like roughly what, like 16? Because Angeal's like a few years older. And even like when we see Sephiroth trying to celebrate with Glenn and the gang in a flashback, they're all drinking from beer mugs and everything, so they're clearly of drinking age, so that puts them quite a bit above Sephiroth. They'd called him brat and kid and all this other stuff in episode 1. But this chapter establishes so much loss for Sephiroth and just him wanting to feel normal. And as of now, he's pushing people who are genuinely trying to reach out, like Angeal, back. And I don't trust Alyssa one bit at this moment. Like, it could just be some weird stuff. It could just be she's just a weird, quirky girl, almost like Aerith, but something seems dark here. So much of Final Fantasy, well, all of Final Fantasy VII hinges on the moment that Sephiroth learns the truth of how he was made and born and everything, but he still doesn't know the truth of his mother at that point. As far as he's concerned, it's still Genova. So I think this is really a perfect, just episode to really be like, these possible influences and other things are really starting to get in his head, and he acquires this sword, which, in the lore they introduce, the spirits of this land commanded Masamune to make this blade, and then it quite literally gave him like a demon-esque fervor to find the person who will take this blade from him. He has multiple forms and everything. So, there's a bunch of craziness going on. Angeal's really the only voice of reason so far. And after all of this, when it looks like the Masamune is in Sephiroth's grasp, that's not the end of these trials. And then we see Glenn, ? Is this a Glenn? Because it's clear later on that Matt and Lucia are clearly illusions. Which, of course, my knee-jerk is to be like, Glenn's an illusion. However, it's just, Rebirth has left me with a lot of questions about Glenn that I want answered. And even like that little teaser for the first Soldier content, like the CGI movie, has Sephiroth and Glenn encountering each other pretty much at the start of Crisis Core, maybe right before, when he's trying to call Genesis and get in touch. And
it kind of makes me feel like that's going to be like the climax of this story in a way.
Because there's clearly some bigger plan going on. And there's stuff in Rebirth about Glenn talking about like his first death, which that could be Sephiroth
Hmm.
speaking through this puppet using Glenn's likeness to just do things with Rufus and clearly control some things in the background. But it's just these puppets are so lifelike and seem to kind of harbor some of the memories or even spirit in them. Because we see like Roche's fall into turning into just one of these other black robes. And it makes me wonder if there's just something there. Because, Cloud's getting messed with and stuff too. You're just a puppet, yada yada. But it's clear that influences like this can be pushed back. Because I think what this episode is showing us is a bunch of parallels right now. Because honestly, I'd say there's so much in common with Sephiroth and Cloud, and there's so much in common with Angeal and Zack. This is a story of legacy, and we're really seeing how that goes. Because we know Sephiroth's legacy is ultimately being made into what he ends up considering to be a monster. He's torn from his mother, injected with alien DNA, and various other tests and other things. But it's ultimately Sephiroth's decisions that end up getting him, well, all the way to what the end of FF7 is. That's what ends up getting him defeated, because he ends up buying into a legacy and not making really his own path forward, is kind of like the read I'm getting currently. Of course, that can change. But, man, and we see some glimpses of Hojo and other stuff. There's just a lot here, and this episode's not even done yet. And really, after the last episode of Under the Plate, I'm just more convinced than ever that even if we don't directly see some of this adapted into Rebirth, or, well, Part 3 rather, something surely. But there is so much here to where we can see some of these other characters show up or be mentioned, and it adds like another layer to what's going on.
No, absolutely. And thank you for overviewing all that, Payne. I mean, I honestly, admittedly, need to go back and the last two chapters of The First Soldier. I've definitely overviewed them, but not really dove deep into them like I had with prior chapters. And when we talk about part 3 and, referencing again last week's episode, the real moment that I think matters the most in, connection to the remake trilogy is that moment at the end of chapter 1 where Sephiroth first arrives at the Edge of Creation. And, he gets this feeling and glimpse of being a hero, and he arrives at, Edge of Creation. And I think that, setting that up for part 3, and when we talk about things like legacy and how he was able to get to where he's going today, I think that's so important, and it's crucial for just everything going on in the future.
And, we've also talked about in the past about, even from the beginning in Remake, when we hit the Edge of Creation, and there's, the Ore and Watashi swap with Sephiroth in Japanese, I genuinely think as a part of this legacy, it could end up being, we've talked in the past, I do not believe Sephiroth will be redeemed, and you don't either. But that doesn't mean you can't kind of humanize it, because people make their decisions and choose their own way, and even if you can understand how they came there, it doesn't mean that you have to agree or even try to, make hours-long video essays on how he was actually right and this was gonna, all that mess. Sephiroth, we'll get into that a bit more in a moment, but this Edge of Creation, 7 seconds till the end, Cloud. And, young Sephiroth is seeing all this before him in a sense. Because it could be like some symbolism and everything. But that's put there for a reason, and a very important reason, and I think you're completely right. When we see that, because we're going to see the Edge of Creation again in part 3, mark my words, I have no doubt. I don't know if necessarily Sephiroth will just be like a, hey Cloud, like I couldn't do this and it's up to you now. I think it will just, be an exchange of blows, and we'll get that archetype of that's really how these type of men truly understand one another. And I think it'll just fall on Cloud's shoulders to make whatever decision pushes Part 3 to wherever it's going to end up.
Definitely. No, I definitely agree. And I mean, Edge of Creation is something so important in the remake trilogy. And admittedly, we definitely need to do a video on it at some point. But I think really, again, this is just a moment that matters so much to the end of remake, the end of rebirth. And of course, like with part 3, we're probably going to end up with this giant 5-hour boss fight that we're going to spend a lot of that in the Edge of Creation in. And so I think setting that up from the initial onset of it and really giving players, I almost said readers, really giving players a complete picture of what that space is and what it means to Sephiroth is going to be crucial going forward. And I think, I kind of want to jump to this idea of him being redeemed, like you had kind of set up and teed off. Sephiroth as a whole, it just doesn't make any sense for him to be redeemed. It goes against everything that this story has been, the reason that it existed this whole time. Like, it goes against everything. And, when we talk about humanizing Sephiroth, right? I think the point of saying that is showing people that there are human elements in him. That doesn't mean, again, like you said, that you have to agree with him and be, oh, this is so wrong, or this is right, or whatever. But I think it's worth noting that, like, he was at one time, as we see in Ever Crisis, like, I want to say, like, a pippy young soldier, right? Like, just this, like, that's what he was at one point, just trying to find his mother. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things that I think that the remake trilogy would really benefit from, because I know that the developers are not just going to jump into saying, oh, he's redeemed, he was a good guy. Like, no, they're not. That's bad writing. And even with Shinra, we mentioned this with Barrett. We had a couple people not too happy with that. And I understand that, but I think, the whole point of us saying, that there are elements of Shinra and Sephiroth that can be humanized is to make an effort to say, hey, the characters can see that not everything is black and white, and even despite the horrific acts that they, committed, that's not excusing any of it. It's just simply saying, I understand in a way why this happened or why this happened. And it doesn't mean I agree with it or make it right, but there's at least some sense of an explanation behind it.
And even just jumping off of that, the Edge of Creation just so far in this trilogy, and just honestly, I'll just say the whole compilation, because everything's connected at this point. Like, just really, just everything is just so connected, because we're constantly, even Ever Crisis has been incorporating things from the novels and some of the extra story stuff. And the Edge of Creation is really, I think, possibly the most important thing besides Worlds that the remake trilogy's introduced as of yet. And
Agreed.
It's clear this is a place of choice. It's where you decide your future. And honestly, especially since we were talking about humanizing, and, well, Sephiroth's made his choices, so there's really no going back from that. The moment Sephiroth changed is when he decided he was a monster there in Nibelheim in that basement. So, it's clear that wasn't quite the path he saw him trying to go on when he sees the Edge of Creation at the end of episode 1 of The First Soldier. Like, he sees this great hero, and maybe there's a part of him that still wants to be that. Or, well, he even says he doesn't want to be it, but he at least sees that future for himself.
Right.
But he chooses a different future. And I'll say this, one of the big lore things that they drop in this, abandoned, destroyed region of Wutai is that when everything went down to get rid of, to, like, push back Masamune because he went berserk after creating the sword, Dachau ended up saving some of the village and founding Wutai. But the place where that village was, that village of Robio, the flames that engulfed it for like 3 years straight, and that's why no one's ever really come back, and they just basically came back to pay their respects and set some stuff up, because Masamune still wandered around there. He was once a man who's just now basically a demon, just who's been wandering this region for like 500 years to find the sword's successor. And there's just this episode so far has just been oozing with legacy, which has been one of the biggest themes of FF7 since its inception. And
Absolutely.
part 3 has to really deliver on that. Because the whole point of Sephiroth's character is how, even if he had these rays of light in his life, because Glenn kind of showed him a new world, and even though a bunch of mistakes were made, clearly something came from that brought him back to Glenn somehow, some way. But really, it's about how you look at the party, just look at the antagonists and the protagonists in the story, essentially, and you see how they follow legacy different. Many of the people in Shinra, even if they end up either getting out of all that, because in Advent Children, we see Rufus is a bit divorced from a lot of that ideology, even if he's pushing his own agenda. But that's him. He made that choice to kind of sort of continue the idea of Shinra, but they're not doing what they were doing. And we already see, especially in Rebirth, he's basically like, I'm not my dad, I'm gonna do everything he did better, various. But ultimately it's about how characters like Sephiroth and members of Shinra have this legacy, but it ends up being twisted and taking them down dark paths. Meanwhile, the party, even if they come from places where they have a lot of loss and suffering, just like any of the antagonists really, they choose to not make what they're given, this legacy, they end up choosing to not make it this horrible thing that ends up taking them on these paths to just even more darkness and despair.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really want to dive when you talk about legacy, and you made a great mention where Sephiroth's like, I don't want to be a hero, right? I think the one thing for me that sticks out, it's all that same scene, the one at the end of chapter 1, but it's whenever he's at the edge of creation, and the reason that he's there is he's reflecting on the fact that he killed Rosen, because Rosen, he wanted to join everyone in the live stream, and he didn't want to just live to live, right? And I think that right there is such a part that is going to really influence Sephiroth's thinking in the future, right? Because at that moment, Sephiroth is seeing that, the fact that, yes, this guy didn't want to just live in existence. He wanted to join the live stream. And I think that, in a way, it's interesting to think about the fact that maybe Sephiroth has intentions of calling Meteor beyond just wanting to become a god anymore, right? Like, what if there is something beyond that Sephiroth really thinks that he's doing people a favor by killing everyone to put them in the live stream, or get rid of it altogether to put them into their next existence in a way, so everyone's together, right? Like, there's so much you can think about from that specific conversation and that reflection with Rosen that could really tie into the future. And that's not redeeming him by any means, but that's something that really kind of potentially gives more depth to his decisions, rather than just, I'm Jenova, I want to do this because I want to replace Jenova and I want to become God or this or that. And it's just, hey, there's a huge multi-layered thing of the reason that this happened, and this is just another reason of why he decided to do what he did. Because I seriously think that reflection with Rosen, that's something that's really going to kind of give him a push, and we'll see that in this game.
Because ultimately, it's all of this that crafted Sephiroth and made him... It's all of this buildup that really makes him just snap in Nibelheim. Because at this point, we even see little things in episode 1 where Glenn kind of jokingly calls him Cyborg and later apologizes, just because of his cold, calculated, and just not human nature in a sense. Like, he has immeasurable strength, and he just doesn't really get along with people. And Glenn starts to open that up. So Sephiroth also ends up making friends later. We already know him and Geo and Genesis end up becoming quite close, and he ends up having, a more minor friendship with Zack. So that clearly affected him in a positive light, especially since I think we talked about it in our first Ever Crisis episode hundreds of years ago now, you know, where Sephiroth as is basically he really is just a glorified propaganda piece at this point in Ever Crisis. He
Hmm.
clearly has the skill to back that up, but really it's, they isolate him from everyone. They have film crews always on him. They're always pushing things out to be like, oh, the soldier program that we've done, it's made this great hero that can protect us all.
Right.
And once his world starts to open up, because at first he's just really adamant about, no, Rosin's the enemy, I don't want to know him. Like, we've already done our mission, we're gonna set up the Mako reactor and everything. But then he has a change of heart because of Glenn. And he's not quite opening up fully to Angeal or anything yet, but he's at least tolerating him and kind of joking a little. So we're seeing Sephiroth grow, and it creates a weird feeling just to know he's not going to grow into a hero. He's not going to have the type of growth and development Cloud does. His growth and development is quite literally twisting him into the villain that's been, honestly, next to Bowser, maybe the most iconic villain in gaming. Period.
Truth.
And it's gonna make this fall from grace just hit so much harder. And I'm sure we'll get some like side quest material that references this stuff. But honestly, I think there is going to be some main story stuff that makes direct calls to Ever Crisis, and possibly just outright dig up some of like Sephiroth's past trauma and what led him onto this.
Agreed. And I think I'm already envisioning it right now. We are about to have a Square Enix fan meltdown on the level of Kingdom Hearts 3 for the fact of, wait, you need to play Union Cross, except it's Ever Crisis this time, for FF7 and not Kingdom Hearts. But yeah, no, I think this is stuff that's just stupid important, I think is the only way to really say it. And I'm really excited to see how they adapt it, because they could put as much or as little as they want to in it, and it's still going to be just as important nonetheless. So I really, when we talk about part 3 as a whole, obviously the Ever Crisis stuff is going to be hugely important. But for me at least, I feel like that there's a couple moments with Sephiroth that I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how they adapt. And of course, one of those is definitely going to be in the North Crater, when Cloud gives the black materia to Sephiroth, and he's in the crystal cocoon type thing. So I'm curious to kind of hear, like, what are you hoping to see in that scene, if anything? Because I know there's some stuff with Cloud that we'll definitely talk about in our next episode, but in terms of Sephiroth, like, anything in particular you're really hoping to see?
Like, that specific scene, I know it's just gonna be just it's gonna be really what starts the game in a sense. It's such a big moment, and we've already been seeing Sephiroth just toy with Cloud so much more. So there's a part of me wondering if there's gonna be some whisper type stuff, and we're already gonna be hit with the bombshell that the rest of the party will be finding out that, oh man, Sephiroth's like actually been dead.
Mm-hmm.
We've been This has all been part of Sephiroth and Genova's will that's been going on. So there will be that big bombshell, and it's going to be a long time before Cloud really gets to clear all this up. Because so much happens at the North Crater, and then he's incapacitated after. I guess what I'm wondering is, I wonder if Whispers will somehow get involved. I'm not quite sure how. There could be, like, maybe Sephiroth's about to drop some type of truth nuke, or someone's trying to say something about Cloud, like, to talk to Cloud about Aerith, or just any number of things. Whispers could get involved. But a part of me's almost wondering Because, you know, in the original scene, we just see Cloud going berserk, and there's a lot of talking from Sephiroth, Cloud, and the party. But I'm
Hmm.
wondering if we'll actually possibly enter some type of headspace or world space in this moment.
Ooh, I like that. That's an interesting take.
Because we see, especially at the end of Rebirth, like, that's another one of these big moments that's a very mental thing for Cloud, and that's when we get the huge blowout of all this world stuff. So I'm wondering if there will be a parallel or connection from that scene to the Northern Crater one, because that's really when they could really just push Sephiroth toying with Cloud, dropping this truth on him, and it could be done in another world. It could quite literally be, oh, what if there is this apparition of Aerith that's like, hey, Cloud, everything's okay, yada yada, but then it becomes Sephiroth or something. Because I think this is really something they could add something like that to be like, no wonder Cloud's just completely destroyed after this.
Yeah, no, they're definitely going to do as much as they can to really solidify like what happened and the reasoning behind it. And I can definitely see them doing something on the caliber of that. And really, for me, I think that that scene's going to be so important because not only is the Sephiroth stuff going on, obviously Genova and, the whole, they've planted the seed in Cloud's head of, is Tifa real? Did she die? And all this stuff. And, that comes to a head in that scene potentially as well. So there's just so much going on in that sequence. It's going to be incredible to see. And I'm super excited to see how they do it. But I will say, out of everything that I'm excited for with Sephiroth, the number one thing has to be like the 5-hour final boss that's definitely going to be there. And it's really interesting because we kind of got an early look at that with the Magic the Gathering card, where Nomura like refused to comment on why Sephiroth looked like that.
We're going to be entering some crazy stuff here soon. Just it makes me wonder if some things might have possibly been scheduled to happen before this set release of Final Fantasy for Magic. Because I do not think under normal circumstances that this would happen. It's kind of like us talking about a lot of this FF9 merch and just, all these constant rumblings of that remake. So I definitely think COVID and just a lot of the internal things that have been going on at Square with like restructuring and everything have kind of thrown some timelines back a few months to a year or two. But it's clear there is something so much more to this, and just the entire ending, I think, is what will really end up telling us how much all this will be paid off. Because now we know, and this first soldier stuff isn't even done. We could end up even getting an episode 3.
I think we will. Like, do you think that episode 2 is going to end with everything? Because I feel like there's so much left. Like, I feel like we'll get 3 at minimum.
I definitely think there's gonna be a third one, and I kind of just like the 3 parts of the remake, 3 members in your party. There's just a lot of 3s in FF7 in terms of structure. So I think it would make sense, not just story-wise, but it just feels like a nice pattern to sink into.
Yeah, because we've got 3 love interests being Aerith, Zack, and Elmira, and all these other people. I mean, there's just so much going on.
And and I just wonder. Hold on, whatever I'm thinking now, we'll talk to you about when we do Cloud. However, it's just this ending. I'm wondering, because I believe we'll see some humanization from Sephiroth, but no redemption. Like, I think we're gonna actually see Sephiroth kind of somewhat normal mental stated at some point during this ending. It's gonna be an epic ending, because we already know interview-wise how they had to truncate rebirths, and they don't need to pull the stops out on this one. This is, for
No.
all intents and purposes, the end of Final Fantasy VII.
No, but we need part four. We need the part four Advent Children 30-hour game. Come on. Come
And
on.
then after that, we need like a almost Princess Maker-esque spinoff with Cloud and Tifa trying to raise Denzel.
No, no. Here's what we really need. What we really need is part four Advent Children and then part five Dirge of Cerberus, except it picks up from right at the end of the game and it's like called Genesis Awakens.
Bruh. And that's honestly some of the bigger stuff we're missing. Because I feel like we're starting to see Sephiroth and Angeal's relationship blossom. But you know who we're missing? We're missing, we're missing the plus the 1 to the 2 we have right now. We're missing this trio. And that means we don't have Genesis yet. Because honestly, it shocked me for a second. I get these are different, like, kind of tainted flashbacks that we're having here because of Robio. But there's, like, no mention of Angeal being like, oh, my friend Genesis is in Soldier as well, I'm going to be joining, or anything like that. And I get it's focusing on some of Angeal's family stuff, but we already know that they've known each other for years because of Crisis Core. So I'm just really wondering, are they waiting for something at either the end of episode 2 or possibly something in like the part 3 reveal to be like, okay, episode 3 is going to be we see Angeal, Genesis, and Sephiroth all together?
Nah, I'm just ready for Genesis to show up and fight Sephiroth in part 3 somehow. But jokes aside, I definitely agree. Like, it is interesting that Genesis has just really gotten nothing yet, but Angeal has gotten stuff. And that kind of leads me to my next point, that I do think that Angeal will show up in part 3 one way or another. And I think the way he will show up is interacting with Zack in the live stream.
I also wonder if we could possibly see some of Sephiroth's worlds. Because you know how Zack kind of falls through a portal at the end of Rebirth?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if Zack could be chasing down Sephiroth and we could possibly be learning either more about him or kind of getting some of this like actually solidified into like these main games.
Oh, dude, you're like making my head run like crazy right now, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like if the interlude sessions were like Zack chasing down Sephiroth or something, and we were getting like flashbacks of his past through those sequences, like that would be crazy. That would be crazy.
So we're gonna have a party in these world interludes of Angeal, Zack, and Glenn.
And Aerith and Genesis, don't forget.
Can't forget.
No, but for real, I gotta say, like, I definitely go back to your point about the fact that like this is the end of Final Fantasy VII, all things seriously. Like, I would expect Square Enix to spend the most money it has ever spent on any game ever marketing this game, because it should. I mean, this is the company's biggest game ever being marketed, and it's the final part of this 10-year project. They should be marketing this like mad, and I know they will. But I think for sure, like, just having a huge final spectacle boss fight and just tying everything together is what we're gonna get. And I'm just so excited to see Save for Sephiroth, because I feel like we've been like waiting for it for so long. And, you know, just getting that tease from the Magic the Gathering set is like, oh man, like, come on, I just want to see this fight.
Dude,
But
imagine
I'm
how
really
they're gonna
excited to
adapt.
see it.
Imagine how they're gonna adapt some of those attacks.
Dude, I'm just ready for the math equations. Like, how are we getting those math equations going crazy on the screen? That's what I want to know.
Like, it's gonna be just like the Hangover. Where Cloud's just gonna be really concentrating.
Oh
He just examined, like, say for Sephiroth, trying to figure this out, and then, oh, there goes every planet in the solar system.
No, dude, that's the funniest. Okay, actually, the funniest part of FF7 for me is that sequence, because it's like, this is not Earth, this is Gaia, but we're going through all of the planets in our solar system. It's like, wait. Like, wait.
Sephiroth's trying to kill us to kill these guys.
I guess. But yeah, no, I'm really excited to see how they do that. And then obviously the end of the game and everything with Sephiroth. But in reality, oh, and of course, like I can't have to talk about it. You know, the One Winged Angel composition is going to be unbelievable.
Dude. This game better win soundtrack of the year again, because I don't see how
It will.
anything's gonna be able to
It
compete.
will. There's no chance. There's no chance. I don't care whatever releases. There is zero chance that something else takes it because everything that we're about to get. Oh my god, just all the compositions. Like I think about like Judgment and all of these songs. Like yes, just please remake them. And I think Rebirth had like 450 tracks. This one will probably have like 600 somehow.
This is gonna be one of the biggest soundtracks of any game. Just period. It's gonna be one of the biggest games. And really, I think to kind of tie up all of our Sephiroth-y goodness here is we've had a big question ever since that last episode, and just I'm pretty sure a lot of people have had this question in their hearts. Why isn't this just like a full-blown like console game? Why is Ever Crisis just
Yeah.
delegated to the phones?
No, it's so crazy to me because I remember when First Soldier was revealed, I was like, okay, cool. But then we started getting all this stuff, and I'm like, man, is Square stupid? Because I'm like sitting here, I feel like a standalone Sephiroth game that focused on as a flashback for his entire character arc previously, prior to Crisis Core, would sell a gajillion copies.
And it could just literally be a bit bigger than Crisis Core, because if they end up having another episode, each of these episodes ends up having about 3 hours of scenes. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that, hey, let's just have like 8 hours of actual voiced cutscenes and everything and make like a full-blown game. Like they already
Yeah.
have some of the basics of Sephiroth's moveset done in Rebirth. And I guess, could we see a playable Sephiroth in Part 3? Like, again?
I mean, that's what we talked about last episode, right? Is kind of having this playable
But I mean-
Sephiroth opening sequence.
But I mean, I wonder if it could go deeper than that.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Like-
what would you think
I'm
when you mean
talking
deeper than that?
I'm talking in this 5-hour final boss fight, could we actually have a playable moment with Sephiroth where he's actually redeemed? No.
No. No. I will say though, it is interesting, you know, we talk about, you know, the different ways that Sephiroth refers to himself. Like, you know, I don't think that Square is gonna do, hey, there's like 3 Sephiroths now, but maybe there's a chance that there's a, you know, kind of Clive versus Clive situation, maybe that's, you know, not necessarily a redeem, but maybe there's something. I don't know. I think that he will be playable, but it's going to be limited to that first section to kind of, you know, open the game with like, what is going on? Oh my gosh, why is Sephiroth playable? Why am I in this? What the heck is going on? Kind of thing. I don't know. I don't put anything past the development team though,
Like,
to be honest.
Beyond my kind of dumb joke, I could almost foresee possibly something, because you know how Cloud and Zack have the team up. I'm not quite sure how to justify it. I'm basically just dropping fan service on the floor right here. But I feel like there could maybe be something where it's like swap between Cloud and Sephiroth. But honestly, the VR missions. So, what if we could just be like, hey, here's some fan service. These are just extra missions. You can play as Sephiroth and fight against Angeal and Genesis on the Junon Cannon.
Oh, dude, that would be so sick. Oh my gosh.
Because, you know, we've already been getting all of these VR missions and battles and extras. Some of which are required to get that hefty platinum. I'm sure you know
Yeah.
all about those. So,
Oh, I do know all about it.
So
Don't
why-
worry.
don't worry, they're on my radar. I'll be getting that platinum, hopefully, by next year. But ultimately, it's like, this is the final part. Even if it's not something that has a big effect on the story, I feel like something like that could be harmless. Because tell me that when Crisis Core dropped in like 2006 and 7, like, dude, I had that cutscene downloaded on my little slide phone. I didn't even have a smartphone yet. Like, that was stuff me and a friend would pass a PSP on the bus around to see. Just let us play some of that. Just go wacky with some of the VR missions, because earlier I mentioned that I'm sure we'll see some of the Ever Crisis bleed just into the general lore. We might hear some NPCs or quest givers talk about some of the legends of Sephiroth and Genesis, and we could hear some more stuff about the Masamune Blade and Wutai, but I think we just need a really fun or cool thing like that.
No, for sure. And I think with the ending, one thing I've been kind of brewing on that I think will be interesting to see explored is the idea that, again, with the live stream, the fact that Sephiroth can't join it. And obviously that sets up Advent Children with Kadaj and everyone else. And not putting it past the development team either to kind of set that up as well, just considering that, we fought the three different, whispers when we fought Harbinger. And those were based on Kadaj and the gang, as we'll call them. But I will say it's just going to be really interesting to kind of see how they potentially set up and tee off this idea that Sephiroth can't join the live stream, and so at the end of the game when he's defeated, maybe seeing a little bit of a personal reflection for him with the fact that he's no longer going to exist physically, but he won't be able to join the live stream.
That could be interesting, but I'm also thinking the inverse. Maybe despite everything, because we even see, well, Genesis kind of returns to the live stream. I'm a little unsure on that because he just kind of gets like eradicated by Athena or Minerva, my bad. But so I'm wondering, because I'm not gonna say certain things because we might have some plans about certain materias or certain characters, but I think there could be a chance, especially with all this world stuff. It's all connected to the live stream. It's multi-layered and multifaceted, so I'm wondering, because even Red 13 wants to help the Gi out. So I'm wondering if there could end up being some type of revelation or way to where maybe everyone can join the live stream. And I'd say that would be possibly the best way to handle a happy ending, is like all these struggles and terrible things still happen and still will continue to happen because that's life. But at the end of that life, everything can cultivate back into the live stream and continue the cycle. Whether the good or the bad happens, life goes on.
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, again, it's interesting because, it feels like that's something that with the flashback at the first part of Ever Crisis and Sephiroth kind of reflecting on when he killed him, I think that's something, again, that really shapes Sephiroth's personal journey and something, I mean, because of course he's insane, like, I hope no one feels that when we were talking about this throughout the episode that we're suggesting that Sephiroth isn't this insane monster. Like, no, he's a lunatic. But I think that there is, that's definitely an interesting thought that I think definitely has room for further expansion, just because of the fact that, we have multiple threads now of people who can't join the live stream but wish to rest peacefully.
Maybe Sephiroth will just go chill with the Gi or something. Just kidding. But I do think there has to be something more to these worlds beyond just exploring more like the live stream and mental stuff. I'm wondering if they could provide like an actual answer. Because, we see characters alive and dead. There's a bit of them in these worlds, able to make them appear like, the actual plane everything really takes place in. So I just feel like there's so much untapped potential that we could see come to fruition. And even without any of that, it doesn't even need that to land this plane. Like, we have so much bolstering Sephiroth's character that as long as they deliver upon what Ever Crisis and the First Soldier have been giving us, that I think we'll, once again still have one of the greatest and the most iconic villains in gaming, and he'll be even more fleshed out, even cooler, and done even more in these games.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think in general, there's so much with Sephiroth that is just kind of sitting here that has the potential to really elevate this final chapter in the remake trilogy. And I think we both feel that Ever Crisis is going to be a huge part of that. But with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Plate. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you kind of enjoyed this double feature of episodes on Sephiroth the last few days. Be sure to let us know down in the description, or be sure to let us know in the comments what you think and what you're hoping to see from Sephiroth in Part 3. And with that being said, I should probably stop talking, so we'll catch you in the next episode.